Hello and welcome to On the Corner, the official podcast of pitcherlist.com. I'm your host, Eric Smolsky, joined in this new year by the man, Nick Pollock. Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New Year. Oh my gosh.
What a
Let's
year
jump
it's
back
been.
into this.
We got to do it.
You know, it's 2025. There is so much to do, so much to see, and there's nothing wrong with taking the back street. We are going to talk about pitchers once again as we lead up to February 11th, the official launch of PL11. We'll have an article out in the middle of January outlining all the things that are coming your way and the ability to sign up for PL Pro Lifetime again. But I'm just happy to jump in and talk about pitching again. Eric, I'm sure you are too.
Yes, I am. We talked about this before we started recording. A lot of time the last few weeks spent not just running around crazy with family, but covering that sport that you would prefer I not mention on this recording. And we're getting ready for the Roto World Baseball magazine to debut, which will be an online magazine. So I've been writing a lot about hitting. So yeah, it's good to just chat with you, shoot the you-know-what, and talk about some pitching. It's going to be good, man. It's going to be good.
So how are we doing that today?
Yeah, so, first of all, before we do that, Nick, this is the 500th episode.
Oh, yeah.
Of On the Corner. And I got to say, as a longtime listener, before I jumped on here to do my best Alex Fast impersonation.
You're doing it.
Was always a huge fan of the show. Loved what you guys were doing. Love the content every week. Been a big fan of the list and just the vibe of things over here. So hat tip to you, hat tip to Alex, for getting all the way out here to 500, and I'm happy to be a part of it right now.
Yeah, really, it really hard to fill in for Alex Fast, and you've created a different show, and it's great and it's fantastic, and I can't really think of anyone else who would be able to do that outside of you, Eric, to get us to 500. But yeah, that started 7 years ago, and if you guys don't know it, there is a photo. It actually gets us 2025 now. It's actually 9 years ago. It's 2016. There's a photo of our first podcast in the foyer of this small 2-bedroom apartment where we shared a single microphone, a Blue Yeti, on top of a nightstand as we're sitting on couch cushions. Like, it's the most ridiculous setup you've ever seen. And I took a photo because I was like, this is going to be something we reflect on. So here we are, 500. Pretty wild. I can't wait for 1,000. Thank you all so much for listening to us over the years. And no, I will not have a top 500 starting pitching article to honor it. Okay. I'm still stressed that I'm going to be doing this top 400 one because I'm a madman, but got to get it done. And really, what's really important at this moment is understanding things have changed since we last spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so curious to see how people have drafted differently.
Yep.
I still stand by exactly what I was thinking for the most part back in November, but it doesn't seem that everyone else does. And we're going to be looking at all the different ADP trends, or really just the ones that stand out to us as being either too low, too aggressive inside of this ADP. And tell us some more about this, Eric.
Yeah, so we went over to the NFBC platform. We took the ADP from drafts from December 16th through now. That is 22 drafts that have taken place since then. These are most of these drafts that are happening at this point in time. We chose all drafts to get the majority, as much information as we can. Interesting to note, most of these drafts at this point in time are draft and holds. If you don't play in those leagues, what it means is that you don't actually get to make any waiver moves during the season. You have huge rosters, 50-person rosters, and you can set your lineup every week, but you can't add anybody off waivers. So what tends to happen in those drafts is you're drafting players who have a little bit more safety or security, because again, you can't just add a hot streaming pitcher off the waivers. So some of the information that we see here in the ADP will be skewed towards that, and you'll see some guys who are perceived injury risks, who might be going later than they will be going when we start typical redraft leagues, which tend to kind of kick off in like February and March. We'll try to address those as we go through, but we're going to look at kind of like bucket off like sections of like top 20 starters, 20 to 40, who are guys right now that really kind of stand out. And Nick and I will tell you what their current ADP is, and just our thoughts on where they're at right now. It'll be a little bit of a loose conversation without much stats and data, but that'll be good.
I mean, we're gonna obviously bring that stuff in there.
Well,
We
sure,
always
we
do.
do. We always
But
do. Yes.
yeah, we gotta. Some of these are so vastly different
Mhm.
from my October ranking.
Yeah.
And others, I'm happy to see that pretty much my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I guess 6. I mean, of the top 6, 5 of mine are there. So at least
Right.
me doing a blind version worked out.
Yeah.
It was
And
okay.
we'll actually that's a good segue to jump right in. We should note Shohei Ohtani is first here. That's because within this platform, Shohei Ohtani is both a hitter and a pitcher. So he is technically the first pitcher off the board in ADP,
Right.
but because you're also getting hitting stats, that skews it a little bit. You still had him inside the top 10. I think you and I would both take him inside the top 10 as just a pitcher in terms of starting pitchers. But starting pitchers only, Skeens has jumped Scooble with an ADP of 12.7. Scooble is at 14.3. So they're kind of like right next to each other. Interestingly, again, neither one of those guys would be a first round pick in a 12-team league, which is a little bit of what you and I mentioned in terms of the overall starting pitcher landscape. Zach Wheeler comes off the board third. And then this is a surprise to me, and I wanted your take on this. The fourth starting pitcher off the board, excluding Shohei Ohtani, is Logan Gilbert.
Yeah.
At pick 28 overall. Now, you and I are both fans of Logan Gilbert, but neither one of us had him inside the top 10. I'm curious your thoughts on Gilbert as the four. You may have had him 10 exactly.
I think I had him at 10. Maybe even 9th, but I mean, I was right around there.
But I'm curious him fourth, what your read is on that.
Right. So there's been so much discussion, I think, about in the Mariners being the anti-cores now in Seattle. And there is definitely an impact of being just a better pitcher in Seattle. What's interesting to me is I feel as Luis Castillo is getting a hit for that, a ding, as he's at 23 here, or really, 23, and Gilbert isn't. He's at 5. He's such an interesting one to me because if you're going to be a top 5 pitcher, you have to do at least 2 things incredibly well. You have to get a ton of strikeouts volume-wise. And you generally need to be not volatile. Like you're not really, you're more of a command guy. And what's so interesting about Logan Gilbert, yes, he has the number 1 PLV slider because his extension is 7.5 and that's just bonkers. And he would throw tons of strikes with it. And that's just kind of how it is. I don't consider him the greatest command guy. Control's fine. But I felt there are many games that I watched with Logan Gilbert where he couldn't really do what he wanted. He would lose batters and he would just kind of get, I don't know. He just wouldn't be that guy. That would be say, cool. I've got my amazing pitch. I'm just going to throw it and you can't touch it right now. I always felt that his fastball should perform better than it does. And I think that's because he can't really set guys up like other guys do with their heaters. And what's even more surprising to me is that Garrett Crochet, even though he was traded, right? December 16th, Garrett Crochet was gone by this point. So why is he still underneath Logan Gilbert? I don't know. Crochet to me is, I think, the most solid skills pitcher of the lot. I know that sounds nuts. You have Paul Skeens here and all, but when it comes to Crochet throwing 97 with elite extension, a cutter that looks exactly like it, a sinker now that looks exactly, he doesn't even need the secondary improvement in his slider and his changeup for Crochet to dominate. He just dominated as it was. And now he's removed from all the ridiculousness of last year. And you can even argue that Crochet did exactly what you want him to do to have 180 plus innings this year. They took care of him, and too much of a degree, if you ask me, but fine, they took care of him. And now he's off to be a stud. Like, this is the most obvious, amazing play in Garrett Crochet, whose skills are better than Logan Gilbert's. And sure, he goes to Fenway, which is not ideal, but when you're Garrett Crochet, when you're a stud pitcher, it doesn't matter. Much better scenario for him overall. I'm still surprised that he's at 5. At least he's up to 5 now. I remember when we were in First Pitch Arizona, everyone was like, oh, he should be in 53 or something like that.
obviously the big change for him,
Right,
team
going to
context
Boston and
wise,
everything like
going
that,
to
going away from the
Boston.
White Sox and the winds
Right.
changing. I still thought that was wild, but that's another story for another time.
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, I have been engaging as professionally as possible on Twitter, X, whatever. I'm pushing back on, there's so many people that cite his second half stats as if like, why are we buying into, why are we
No.
like there's a comparison of like, why are we hesitant of like what Jack Flaherty did in the second half last year, but we're not hesitant on Garrett Crochet,
You're kidding.
right? And there's a lot of people saying, well, he has only 1 year as a starter and the second half was really bad. And I think people know the context that the White Sox limited his innings, but I don't think people, but then they'll say, well, they're limiting his innings, but he wasn't pitching well in those innings, because they're looking at the stats of like, this is what his ERA was, this is what his whip was, etc. And I just think we're losing the context of like, this is a dude who, like, even when he was rolling in starts, wasn't allowed to pitch more than 3 or 4 innings. And starting pitchers, as you can attest to, are creatures of habit and creatures of rhythm and creatures of comfort. And if you are going to tell a starting pitcher that they're not, even if they're throwing well, they're not going to pitch more than 3 or 4 innings. It's not just like, oh, well, I'll just go out and dominate for 3 and then it is what it is. Like, you are upsetting the rhythm, you're upsetting the timing, you're upsetting all the prep that starting pitcher is doing. It is, and that leads to starts that are just, he had some garbage starts, and that's going to happen. I don't think that's an indication of him or an indication of him tiring. And so I really would urge people to throw out his second half numbers. Just don't even look at it. It's a team that was bottoming out, bottoming out that clearly didn't want him to pitch, that was also thinking about trading him. And so it's just like all of those things are factored into just why he had some real inconsistent starts there, but the talent remains.
Absolutely. And you actually said something that I'm surprised you didn't lean into more, is that those games where he didn't go, he was rolling and got pulled. When you're an ace pitcher, I look at this and I say, right, every pitcher is gonna have bad starts, even aces. But what covers them are the games where you are a stud for 6, 7 innings.
Right.
And he didn't get that because he was stopped at 3 or 4. So if you want to say, oh, he had a 4.84 ERA, well, remember that his last 3 games were 4 innings each, where he allowed 1 earned run, and that should have easily been 6 innings for those. That's 50% more innings than those after that. You have so many other games where he just dominated for only 3, though. But right, his problems came in the first or second. So there you go. That's all you see. 4 innings, 2 earned runs. That's a 4.5 ERA. He doesn't get to go 2 more innings to make that a 3 ERA. I mean, that's please do that. And also, even in that bad, it's 35% K rate and a 6.5% walk rate. Like, guys, 18% swing strike rate in that time. Garrett Crochet is absurd and amazing in that context as well, of course, of being on the White Sox, who just did not care, and the whole morale of it was the worst thing ever. Throw that away. But anyway, Garrett Crochet, to me, I could actually see an argument that he should be SP1. And there's a part of me that really wants to do that. But it's still going to be Tarek Skubal 1 for me. Skeens 2, Wheeler 3. Or no, Crochet 3, Wheeler 4. That's still going to be what it is for me next year. I think anyone would be stoked about them. I'm still going to be on the train of just not going after pitching. And I think one of the things I'm seeing here, which is a little surprising, is I'm only seeing 5 pitchers outside of Ohtani definitively go before the first 3 rounds of 12 teamers in this, because that would be around pick 36. And Burns is going around 38.
Yeah.
And that's annoying because it's correct and means that I can't get all the hitters I want.
You and I talked about this, and like, we'll see what happens when the redraft leagues start. But you mentioned at the top of the show that like nothing we're seeing in these early drafts indicates that we should change our strategy of waiting on starting pitching.
Yeah.
We did a Roto World mock draft with, fantasy analysts from various platforms. It was a 12-team mock draft, so keep that in mind. I did not take a starting pitcher before the 6th round of this draft. I took only 2 starting pitchers in the first 10 rounds of the draft. My 6-man rotation at the end of the draft was Max Fried, Shane McClanahan, Spencer Schwellenbach, Sandy Alcantara, Ryan Pepio, and Bobby Miller.
I mean, you're great. You got it.
And that's in pretty good shape. Again, 12-team league. So like you take a Bobby Miller at the end of a draft because he either makes the rotation and looks good in his first start or two, or he doesn't, and you find somebody else. But like that's without investing any real high quality assets in starting pitching. And so I still believe that's the way to go. I want to round out the top 20 starters here by highlighting. Well, we should just say Garrett Crochet was 6 or 5 if we're excluding Ohtani. Corbin Burns after him, Chris Sale 7, DeGrom 8, Kirby 9, Cole Reagan's 10. And then 11 and 12 are two guys I wanted to talk to you about because historically you've been a little lower on Dylan Cease, who's SP 11 right now, and Blake Snell, who's SP 12, given their volatility, I should say. I'm curious your read on those two guys being just outside of the top 10 right now.
Yeah, so I'm gonna put Ohtani right there at Cole Reagan's just to make this easier for us.
Okay.
So then Cease at 12 and Snell at 13. I mean, do what you want, guys. They're both volatile. And I feel that with this massive pool of starting pitcher, don't go for volatility. Don't go
Right.
for like the one who has shown constant struggle to do the same thing start to start.
Right.
I'm not saying that Blake Snell cannot have success in LA. Of course he can. We've also seen the song and dance that he does every year, and we also know the impact as a fantasy manager, where we're just waiting and praying and hoping and being so anxious, saying, "Look, it's the second week of May, and Blake Snell is not looking like he's supposed to." But every year it's the second half, right? That happens every single year, and it's just so frustrating to deal with. Yes, he's come through. I can't tell you that Blake Snell's going to be able to toe the line as well as he has previously in another season. It's also a skill that should get worse over time as the velocity does decline over time as well. Then you have Dylan Cease, whose biggest struggle is how to deal with left-handers, as his slider is not a consistent offering against them, and he leans on four-seamers too often. That's why I keep yelling about a cutter for Dylan Cease. We'll see what happens, but that is why you see inconsistency from Dylan Cease. Absolutely destroys right-handers with a four-seamer and slider combo. It's just about making sure you have something against lefties, and he doesn't quite have it. And what is so shocking to me is you have all of these amazing pitchers, amazing ones after. We have Garrett Cole, you have Pablo Lopez, Michael King, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Framber Valdez. I'll even say, you know what? Framber's got it too. He did amazing things in the second half. I won't take him, but he's another solid one. Aaron Nola, Bailey Ober, Shota Managa, Luis Castillo. I mean, you can go all the way down. You got Zach Gallen, and you have Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan's at 33. McClanahan's at 35. There are so many studs. Brian Woo's going at 41. Look, I don't feel as if I need to go after Cease and Snell at 12 and 13 is my point. I would really even say Michael King is far more appealing to me at 18 because he's peak Aaron Nola to me. And he's such a consistent win situation, 6-inning plus guy, strikeouts galore. Like, he's your guy. And him at 18 ADP is the clear steal, the 67th overall pick.
That was,
Oh my
that
God.
was what I wanted
Every
to talk to you
single
about
league, I will have Michael King if that's the case as my first starter.
Because we both have King inside of our top 10. And so it feels wild to see him, not wild, I guess, but it feels crazy to see him this low.
Yeah.
And maybe people just not buying in on, what he did. I don't really know. We know the team context is good. We know the results were great. I could see maybe not putting him in the top 10, but him at 18 behind Framber, like I guess because you feel like Framber is safer, he's more consistent. Sure, I guess.
I want to remind everybody that the last 20 games, last 20 starts, beginning on the 27th of May. This is across 113 innings. Michael King had a 2.24 ERA, 113 WHIP, and a 29% K rate. I mean, I'm not even going to all the massive metrics that we have about Michael King. Just understand that this is so obviously a guy who had his struggles in the beginning, got locked in, and everything was done after that. And
now
I
you're
remember
talking
even
about
debating at the beginning of the year that it was the sweeper that he didn't have at first and got that in, and everything was cool.
And now you're talking about a guy who is coming into his second full offseason as a starting pitcher. So all of those, like, hey, is it going to work as a starter? Is it going to work? Those the durabilities, the inconsistencies, like you would imagine that only continues to get better as he is more established in his routine as a starter and doing what he needs to do as a starter. And the innings concerns were like the only real concerns heading into 2024 because we knew what he was like as a pitcher. It was just, can he keep this up over 6 innings, 7 innings starts? Can he keep this up over a full season? And he emphatically answered those questions.
Yeah.
So unless you think that everything he showed last year he's going to lose, and I don't understand why we would think that. I think he's a screaming buy at 18. And I would love to kind of like wait and get him and whoever else falls, like double tap starters, and all of a sudden, like, I have 2 starters I love without having to invest a really high end pick for that.
What's amazing is if you ask yourself, hey, what is Michael King's best pitch? Right. You can make an argument, hey, cool, it's the sinker. He has a 30% called strike rate on that. It's his 4-seamer with 30% CSW and a sub 40% ICR. Actually, none of his pitches are over 40% ICR. Michael King's pitches, all of them induce the contact that you want. But his changeup at a 22% swing strike rate. And one of the bigger things we see in guys who are sinker focused is that they do not have answers against opposite handed batters.
Mm-hmm.
And to have a changeup at about a 70% strike rate and that swing strike rate, oh my, that is just how he gets through games consistently. It's phenomenal. And of course, then he has a fantastic sweeper as well. And he's really good, guys. He has a 4-seamer that gets whiffs also at 13% swing strike rate. Like, this is the guy you want on a winning ball club with a great defense.
Yeah.
And the biggest argument I know about Michael King not being worthy of a higher pick is there was worry about injuries entering the season last year. And they still think there is some durability question. It's just at 173 innings. I can't express this enough. He is the poster child for a pitcher who should be able to go 6 innings constantly.
Mm-hmm.
It is Michael King. And what you normally have to sacrifice is a strikeout rate at 23%. But he makes it up in volume. And yet he has 28% strikeout rate. Like, he has 30% potential for this. I can't emphasize this enough. He had over 200 strikeouts last year.
Right.
Stop treating him like he's a 170 Mike's Fried type.
And I also know people are like, oh, well, without, if Ha-Seong Kim leaves, even though he wasn't great, the defense is a little bit of a downgrade. Like, King had a 40% ground ball rate last year. It's not like he's a 50% ground ball rate guy where he really needs the infield defense to support him. Yes, it would hurt him if it's Xander Bogaerts and Jake Cronenworth up the middle. That's not a great defensive middle infield at this stage in their careers. But King is not, when Sandy Alcantara was running like 50% ground ball rates and he needed that infield defense, it would help King, but it's not, he doesn't rely on it for his success. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I am excited to talk to you about one of the pitchers that you were incredibly high on coming into the offseason. We were down in First Pitch, Arizona, who is seemingly rising up the ADP rankings. And we'll talk about him after this break.
I'm going to run into a very quick ramble of the guys that put in orange, just so you know.
Okay, go for it. I'll cue that up before.
All right.
So we'll prolong this tease a little longer of the starting pitcher I'm talking about, because I know there were 2 pitchers inside the top 10 that you wanted to just briefly mention.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm seeing at the 8th pitcher is Chris Sale, who, by the way, we all know miracle season, and no one really expected top 5 SP potential.
Mm-hmm.
Eric Samolsky over here was saying, guys, we should be drafting him. Absolutely right. But Eric, at least I know you'll admit that you didn't think he'd be that good for the
No,
entire year.
I
Not
think
a
I
chance.
wound up heading into the season with him at like 18,
Right.
19, something like that. So yes, I never
So,
saw this coming.
what was the big concern entering Chris Sale's season last year?
It was first of all, it was durability,
Yeah,
right? And innings. And then it was also that he didn't look sharp the season
right.
before, that like the slider
Yep.
caught a lot of middle and got
Yeah,
slapped
and the
around a
fastball
little bit.
velocity not really showcasing what it used to be.
Mhm.
What we got from Chris Sale this year was the best command I've ever seen from him, while not increasing the velocity as nearly as much as we wanted to see back from like 2018. And we got a gift of health, an absolute wonderful cloud gift. Just hello, let me bring this down for you. Wear this crown. And
Except
the
except until the
idea,
very end of the season.
right? The idea that now he's this healthy pitcher should be completely gone from the fact that he didn't pitch in the playoffs because he was hurt. But he's still ahead of Jacob deGrom. And I just have we forgotten that Jacob deGrom is the best pitcher on the planet? It's his second TJ. The second TJ thing also bothers me because there is not enough data to say that if you get your second Tommy John, you're just not good anymore. I
Mhm.
very much grasp that we have seen some guys. Walker Buehler was not what he used to be. I have the argument Walker Buehler is not what he used to be because he doesn't have sticky stuff anymore and doesn't know what to do with his arsenal. And I think we're going to see a better version of him this year as we finally got to a point of like, hey, cool, try to keep doing what you're doing. Oh, if that's not working, maybe now you're going to try something new. It's not because he got second Tommy John. And we saw Jacob deGrom throw 99 in September. It's not like we just still have no idea if he's going to be
And
good at all. Like we
and we
know
have a
that deGrom
season
has it.
we have a season in 2021 where DeGrom only threw 90 innings and was the best starting pitcher in fantasy baseball. So like
Like,
if you're, and yes, I don't know that this version of 37-year-old Jacob deGrom is putting together a 108 ERA with a 45% strikeout rate. But what we're saying is like, even if you were to get 90 innings of deGrom, if he's close to the deGrom that we've seen throughout his entire career, 90 innings of deGrom is still an easy top 10 starting pitcher in fantasy. And again, I understand it's somewhat league dependent. If you're saying, hey, I can throw him on the IL when he goes on the IL and add somebody else, cool. If you're in a format where you don't have an IL, and so it's harder to replace him or harder to put him on, hold on to him, I understand that. And maybe you don't take him 7 or 8, you take him somewhere in the top 20. But like, I think DeGrom is firmly a top 10 starting pitcher. And I think Sale is a top 10 starting pitcher if you feel like you're getting 150, 160 innings again. And I don't know how we feel confident we're getting that, right? DeGrom, we're
right.
talking about getting 90 innings. We're not talking about getting 150.
Oh, it's this the main thing here is look, I am aggressive on Jacob deGrom, but it's also for 12 teamers, 15 teamers. In this, I can understand being more suppressed. Fine. I think the real gripe I have is the Sale versus deGrom.
Mhm.
And I just can't put Sale above him. And I can even understand people, especially like a draft and hold. Maybe that's what is getting favored here. But it's just if you have deGrom at 9, you can't have Sale at 8. It just doesn't hit me the right way. It just doesn't make sense. And look, Jacob deGrom, especially in a 12 teamer, it feels to me as if it's going to be April 23rd and Jacob deGrom is healthy and doing amazingly well. And we're all going to be like, yeah, it's Jacob deGrom. We're all really happy with it. And let's hold on. And what's even crazier is then at 32 is Tyler Glasnow. Like, can we get on the page of just how we assess innings for the next year? Because this is just all over the place of Sale at 8, deGrom at 9, Glasnow at 32, McClanahan at 35, Alcantara at 47, Spencer Strider at 40. What? I don't get it. So
We
I
have
don't know.
we will never come to a consensus on that. We continue to struggle with that. I talked on with James Shiano on the Rotor World podcast the other day about like the Corbin Burns, people worried about Corbin Burns' injury because he's thrown so many innings. And it's like we talk about we ding pitchers because they haven't thrown lots of innings and we say they have durability concerns. And then we ding pitchers when they do throw a lot of innings because we say, well, there's an injury coming because they've thrown so many innings recently. There's just no
Right.
consistency in the
So
way that we factor in injuries into how we evaluate pitchers. And that's why we've said this before, but that's why like it's a lot easier to look at projections for a hitter and say this is what the hitter projection is going to be. I'll use that in my rankings, in my drafts, whatever. And with pitching, you really have to just say, what is the baseline talent for this pitcher? How comfortable do I feel about an innings total, me personally? Because I think we still, as an industry, as baseball fans, as baseball writers, as I'm sure there's more information that teams have that we don't have access to. But what we have access to publicly and what we discuss, there is yet to be a consensus on how to use injuries to properly kind of like predict how many innings a pitcher might actually throw.
right. And I mean, it really just says to me, we're the guy with the sweating superhero with 2 red buttons, of
Mhm.
say that he's thrown too many innings, so he's gonna get hurt. He's thrown too few innings, so he's gonna get hurt. It's, just say, look at the skills then. Just draft for skills for the most part. Every pitcher gets hurt. You can make the argument that Jacob deGrom has a healthier elbow than a lot of other guys because he's coming off of Tommy John. It's the same way I feel actually about Shane McClanahan and Sandy Alcantara. Alcantara already throwing 99. Like, I'm going after that a lot more than I see Joe Ryan getting dinged at 33 because he had some arm stuff at the end of the year, but he's apparently okay. But I understand that fear. It's all over the place. And I'm going to tell you right now, my rankings are going to say, look, there are so many starting pitchers. And that means for me, I'm going to go for more of the skills
Mhm.
and not try to pick this one is going to go 180. This one's going to get hurt as much as others. So I'm going to be pretty standard and stick a lot with the aggression that I had of DeGrom and Ohtani and Glasnow and Alcantara and McClanahan as I
Well,
did
yeah,
back in October, unless there is more information that says, look, Ohtani will not be starting the year.
sure.
We know that he won't be pitching the Japanese series or the Japan series, I should say. And then if it means that he's pitching in June or so, it gets a little trickier. So
Right. Same
I'm
thing.
okay with that. Same with
Strider, we
Strider,
know.
right?
Strider,
Yeah,
we know won't be ready for opening day. We don't yet know how far away he'll
right.
be. I think you and I are both, just to wrap up these injured guys, like Shane McClanahan going the 35th starter off the board, to you and I think both is a screaming buy as well.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Oh my
you and
gosh.
I both have him inside the top 10. So if I can wait and get him outside of the top 20, I'm more than happy to do it. I talked to Jason Collette at First Pitch Arizona. Obviously, Jason is like very plugged into the Rays. He thought
Yes.
that the Rays would be cautious with McClanahan, but not like strictly like, hey, you're throwing 120, you're throwing 130. It's like he may not push 180 innings, but they're gonna, they're gonna keep an eye on it. But I think it's very likely he could still get 140 innings, 150 innings, and you're getting that amount of like an elite. I mean, he was an elite starting
Oh my
pitcher.
gosh. Oh man.
And we seem to be forgetting that. And then I don't know, Max Fried at 29. I don't know if that's people
Yeah.
concerned about his injuries because, yes, he has been on the IL with forearm injuries in both 2023 and 2024. But like, I know he went to Yankee Stadium, but Atlanta's home park is not a pitching environment. It's not like
No.
he went from a pitching environment to a hitting environment. His team context is not that much worse. Like, even if you don't think the Yankees are what the peak Braves were the last 2 years, it's a good team. And he wasn't pitching in an easy division. And now he's pitching in a hard division, but I just don't like, I don't get how Fried goes all the way down to 29 unless you're saying, well, I think he's going to get hurt. And then that's the same question of like, well, why do you think he's going to get hurt more this year than you thought he was going to
Right.
get hurt last year when he had a couple IL stints, but it's not like we have a clear sign that forearm is a ticking time bomb. It's
Yeah.
risky, but everybody is a little bit risky.
And it's also just you have other guys. You have like Hunter Brown in here. And I see Hunter Brown at 31 and I go, wait. We are not totally solved on Hunter Brown. I very much know about his return from grace after the ridiculous game against the Royals that were so bad. If you've ever watched that game, it's a 4 outs, I believe, of him just throwing either right down the middle, hanging breaking balls, or fastballs that are so out of the zone that it's so clear he can't throw a fastball. So guys are just waiting for this hung breaking ball and then crushing it. And after that, he had a really productive season from the ratio standpoint. But from a skill standpoint, yes, moving away from the slider to the cutter did wonders for him. But I still feel that he's not a finished product, and we don't really quite know what we're going to get out of Hunter Brown. But I also see Justin Steele at 38, and I just go, this is the elbow thing again? Is this what's going on? Is that why he's down here? Because he's just been so consistently good at what he does. Sonny Gray, I mean, he had a 30% K rate in 2024. That's wild to me. Even
And then
I see Robbie Ray, who's another 30% K rate guy, down at 46, and that's 165 overall. And I'm not saying that he's going to be amazing, but to see that gap between him and Hunter Brown, 111, it gets interesting to me of where the weights are going and why guys are shifting one way versus in another. Brian Wu, obviously the injury stuff with him, but I feel much stronger about his consistency, right? And it's always interesting seeing ADP like this. I try to pull myself away from ADP as much. Like I'm going to have a glimpse at it now, and then I'm not going to touch it again. I don't want to study this. I don't want ADP to affect me because ADP innately isn't a metric, really. It's just groupthink. So come to your own consensus on this stuff and then come back and see ADP and try to understand what weight they are putting on for these reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything else stick out for you?
Well, I would just say I'll just wrap up the injury section with a guy who's not in the top 40, but just outside. You mentioned Brian Wu. I chatted with Dr. Dave on Twitter. We were talking about Brian Wu and how he feels like Brian Wu is again obviously like a major risk because of how much time Wu spent on the injury list last year without having any surgery. And you and I discussed this on the podcast a lot, that like it seemed like he was not healthy and was going to miss time, and then he would go and pitch 6 shutout innings, and then the next start he'd leave after 3, and we felt like he was going on the IL, and then he wasn't. And what I said to Dave is like, I think if I'm guaranteed health from Brian Wu, he's a top 15 or 20 pitcher for me. So when I see him at 41, to me that is factoring in the injury risk. And I don't think 41 is too high. He felt like 41 was too high for Brian Wu. I feel like it is accurately factoring in some of the risk. And I'm happy to take Wu at 41. And I'd probably take him over Flaherty, who's going at 39. And
I'm with
yeah,
you.
like I know Flaherty, maybe Flaherty's down at 39. He had a really good season last year. Maybe people doubt, the consistency of it because we've seen him lose the fastball before. We've seen the results ebb and flow. Maybe people are waiting to see where he lands because, maybe he lands in a situation that's not great for him fantasy wise. I personally am of the mind that a return to Baltimore makes the most sense, and they seem interested, and that would be a good pitching environment and a good team environment from him, even though he was really bad for them when they got him. But like, I don't know. I think Brian Wu down here makes a lot of sense. And then the other 2 injury-ish guys that I have highlighted are back-to-back Sandy Alcantara 47 and Kevin Gossman 48. We have Alcantara coming off an injury. We have Kevin Gossman coming off an injury-impacted season. And I know people feel like, again, another conversation I had on Twitter is people feel like Gossman right now is too low, that 48 is too low and that he'll rise up rankings. I feel like 48 makes sense to me for Gossman.
Completely.
And I would much rather have Alcantara than Gossman because, I feel confident enough in Alcantara's health because he had surgery to repair the issue, and he's going to be, well out of the injury risk or re-injury risk stage for it. The team context wasn't good for him before when he was a top 10 starting pitcher. So why am I making team context put him down at 47 now? I think he probably a top 30 arm for me. I was never in on him as a top 10 guy, but I have no problem taking him where he's going or jumping him right now. And I think he and Gossman shouldn't be in the same conversation. I think Alcantara feels like a much safer bet to me.
Oh, I cannot agree more. Considering that Gosman is getting older and you lose feel of a splitter, and it's like that's all you have is really that and the four seamer, and it just doesn't. It's not a recipe for aging well. So I have all the concerns there about Gosman, and I would much rather take the chance on Alcantara. I also feel we won't get such clarity on how Gosman will perform early on, especially for a 12-teamer. He's getting close to, I guess he feels like a Holly where like you're not really going to drop him, but if it goes poorly early on, how long do you hold for a guy like Gosman, right? So I don't want to have to be thinking about that. And I know that Alcantara is like, no, when he pitches, I'm very confident that he will be productive. Even though he had a rough 2023, the Tommy John was a part of that in my view. I would feel very good about Alcantara instead. I highlighted some other things. I'm going to do a major swing here. We're going to actually talk about how it looks in the 200s and later, because I think actually that is a huge element of just showcasing who are the guys that can get late in the draft. Because once you understand that group, then you say, wait, hold on. I didn't have to go and get those guys in the middle because I have these instead. We've all had those drafts, and it's the worst feeling ever. So we're going to talk about those guys after this break. I had to get it in, Eric. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I know. Before we jump, I want to ask you about the Schwellenbach thing, and then we'll jump, because that was the guy I was teasing, and then we never actually got to.
Okay. So Eric.
So Nick.
So Eric, last year there was a guy who was all the way at 600 and wasn't even drafted.
Yes.
He's now inside the top 25. Who is that?
That is the guy that we were teasing over 20 minutes ago.
Over 20 minutes ago.
And then we, kept talking.
Kept going.
It is Spencer Schwellenbach.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big topic of conversation down at First Pitch Arizona. A lot of questions about how many innings he has thrown, both, in the pros, but also in college. Not a huge innings total. There were some concerns about you ranking him pretty high. And then I see the ADP come out, and oh man, seems like everybody's ranking him high. Spencer Schwellenbach up at 24. I guess that feels like you feel like you're in lockstep with the market on that one, and people should feel confident drafting him there. And yeah, I just wanted you to speak on that for a little bit.
I mean, it's a big glob, to use Spore's term. And I feel like in some ways the chips just fell this way. That we happen to be in lockstep. What I like about Schwellenbach is he has a ton of things that are effective. He has a lot of tools. And when I see young arms have a lot of different pitches and also good command of those pitches, and it's not at 91, it's at like 96. Yeah, that should work out for a winning ball club and a team that will let him go 6 innings constantly will need him to. It just makes too much sense in my view. Yes, the four-seamer for Schwellenbach is not that great, even though it comes with that velocity. It is more hittable than we like to see. Nevertheless, Schwellenbach should be a very consistent, almost like a Framber Valdez type of going like 25% strikeout rate and going like a 3+ ERA or so. Good number of wins will get you that volume. Whip, we're hoping, is underneath 115. And that's going to be really nice to have.
Yep. I fully agree on that. I had him originally like in my late 30s, and I have come around after those conversations in First Pitch Arizona. And it's interesting to see him that high. I think I get to myself to pull the trigger there.
Yeah. If you're Jason Collette, you won't, because he's too worried about how quick Schwellenbach has thrown so many innings. I think everyone's going to get hurt. So whatever, just go for it.
Who cares? They're all going to get it.
You got to throw innings to get innings, guys.
You got to. You had mentioned talking about pitchers outside of the top 200. That's outside of the top 200 ADP, not outside of the top 200 pitchers overall taken.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I'll go even further, because the ones we've highlighted I see are right now going outside of the top 250. So we'll talk about starting pitchers outside of the top 250. You already alluded to Walker Buehler, who was going 254, 254.8. Now he's pitching in Boston, still pitching on a 1-year contract. So there is the financial incentive to like go out in a contract year. And, we saw what he did in the playoffs. And he even said he needed the bright lights to like wake him up a little bit. And maybe, and some guys do, they need to be thrown in the competitive fire to find what is actually working for them, and then they can hit on that. And going right before him, pick 254.3 is a guy I know you love. 70th starting pitcher off the board right now, Gavin Williams.
Oh my gosh. This is like I keep looking at all these names, and you guys know me. My whole method is about grouping. It's about taking similar types and putting them together and just weighing those probabilities together, right? Because everybody has different skill sets and different things that they're good at. And the way I look at it, Jose Barrios is a completely different pitcher from Gavin Williams, and also a completely different pitcher from Spencer Arrighetti. But Arrighetti's ahead of Barrios, and Gavin Williams is behind. And I feel no, those two are kind of similar, and Barrios should be further down, because in a 12-teamer, Barrios does not add what you think he adds. Now, this was a 15-teamer. I can understand that for ADP purposes. At the same time, Gavin Williams should not be a 254. Oh my gosh, he has 7 feet of extension, throws 97, added a cutter last year that is still getting refined, but that creates the 4-seamer cutters difference that Garrett Crochet has. That's so exciting. He also has a curveball that does get whiffs. It's not a good control pitch, not a big zone one, and he needs to work on that, does Gavin Williams. But just with that 4-seamer and cutter, and the Cleveland Guardians being very receptive to throwing these younger pitchers 6+ innings and touching 100 pitches in a single start. Oh my gosh, that is the ticket to beating a 250 ADP. It's not even close. Like, you should not be drafting these guys thinking you have them for the year. And this is why this is so important to talk about these pitchers, because a lot of us would say, like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to drop Clark Schmidt all year. He's at 245. But if he's at 245, you go, wait a second. Is the value I'm getting from holding Clark Schmidt more than me taking a chance on Gavin Williams and then whatever I get on the waiver wire? Because if this is the case, well, in your 12-team leagues, it goes to 226. That is the end of your draft. Pick 276. And after that, you've got so much. You have Reese Olson right at 300. Reese Olson. That is Clark Schmidt. It's the same thing. I want that meme with Pam. You have like Jesus Luzardo, who you highlighted now with the Phillies at 310. Brandon Woodruff coming back at 320. I'll take a chance on that and then drop him.
Right. That was like a tier, not a tier, but that was a grouping for me, is like Luzardo, Woodruff, Clay Holmes going 355. Those are all guys where it's like, obviously Luzardo and Woodruff are injury related. Clay Holmes is moving to the rotation related, but they're all guys where like you can make a case for the upside that makes them a top 30, top 40 overall starting pitcher, top 20 for Woodruff, which we've seen him do when he's healthy. And you're getting those guys outside of the top 80 overall starting pitchers. And so this is where, like, again, yes, this is mostly skewed by draft and hold formats. So pitchers like Woodruff and Luzardo coming off major injuries, or pitchers like Clay Holmes, where if he doesn't make the rotation, he's just a setup man for Edwin Diaz in New York, and then basically has no fantasy value. So yes, those guys are going later in these formats because the downside of them is really low and almost unusable. But depending on how they correct in redraft leagues, like, these are the guys to take late, because there is real upside to say, okay, Luzardo, much better team context. Yes, he never quite hit on best starting pitching prospect in baseball that he was coming up, but he is a 3.6, 3.7 ERA pitcher with a decent strikeout rate when healthy, who's going to pitch for a really good team. And even if the home runs, come up a little more in Philadelphia than they were in Miami, and he's a 1-2 whip kind of guy, like, that is a usable starting pitcher. And that's if he doesn't actually get any better. And there are some people who really like the Phillies pitching development and think that, it's not like Luzardo is going to be a 2.90 ERA guy, but like, if he's a 3.20, 3.30 guy again, which he's flashed in the past, on a really good team where he's racking up wins, like, that makes him useful. Woodruff, we've seen be a top 15 starting pitcher. If he's pitching all year, like, he could be useful. These are guys where, like, I really like taking flyers on them at the end. And a guy you highlighted who's going pick 496 right now. The 106th starting pitcher off the board is Bobby Miller. And remember that like Bobby Miller was drafted as a top 15, 16, 17 starter last year. I don't think anybody thinks that he was healthy. Like we know he was on the IL with a knee injury for a long time and he never looked healthy. So we're just assuming he's terrible. We're just like treating it like he wasn't injured. And again, yes, maybe your argument is he pitches in a Dodgers rotation that has so many guys where maybe he spends a lot of the year in AAA. And so in a draft and hold format, I don't want to take that gamble. Okay, fine. But let's say redraft leagues bump his ADP a little bit. What's it going to bump it from like 500 to 350? And I could take Bobby Miller, like pick 350, pick 400. He was my last starting pitcher in that Roto World draft, and I took him in the last round of the draft because I was like, okay, why not? Like I'll take a gamble. I'll see the talent. If the talent is anything close to we saw in 2023, it's a huge pick for you.
There are so many, Eric. There's Cody Bradford at 433. Oh, he only throws 91. The dude had one bad game against Arizona. He's a lefty who spots four seamers with elite extension upstairs with changeups underneath, and that's all he really needs with a good fighter to go against lefties. Like there it is, Lucas Giolito at 567. Like forgotten about in certain drafts, where especially like a draft and hold, fine, but like he's returning this year, and that's Lucas Giolito. Grant Holmes, who should be that is the real estate broker returning for Atlanta this year. Edward Cabrera, who I know it has not gone well so far, but the skills are so there. I actually talked to some guys in the winter meetings who very much believed in Edward Cabrera and dreamed of trading for him, and how the Marlins refused to because they believe in it too. Sean Burke, hi, remember him? 523 now, of course, the White Sox element. I get that one. And still, like Ryan Nelson is down here, 425, and Tobias Myers, who had a really successful year, and I could very much see taking a step forward in his arsenal and actually locating that changeup. It's not really saying like you guys are wrong for letting them slide so far down the ADP. The point I'm really trying to make is this is the largest pool of 12-teamer relevant pitchers who are not getting drafted. By far the largest pool I've seen.
You didn't even mention I don't think you mentioned Luis Garcia, right? Luis Garcia, 578, coming off injury, going to be in the Astros rotation. He was really, really good for 2 years when he was pitching well. So like Yuri Perez.
Yuri Perez, 612. Lovely time. It's wild. So Dustin May should be back in the rotation for the Dodgers. He's at 562.
My boy Luis L. Ortiz.
Yeah, I skipped over him. Jack Leiter, Noah Schultz also as rookies who could be making impacts. AJ Smith-Shawver, so we talked about before. I mean, we can do this for a long time. But what is really valuable with this is saying you are okay to take those risks we're talking about at the top of this episode. That the Tyler Glasnow, McClanahan, the DeGrom, stop focusing so much on getting 3 aces or something along those lines. Instead, take some risks on the guys that when they pitch, you know it's good. It's why I'm not in on Snell and Cease. Nick, those are risks. They are, but for different reasons where they're pitching and we don't know the performance, as opposed to if they are pitching, it's good. It's what you want. That is way more important, understanding the value you're getting. I would so much rather take those chances and know that there are so many others to turn to when it doesn't go well. This is the most blatant, obvious year of that I've seen in, I think, all 11 seasons that I've done Pitcher List.
Yeah.
So,
and look at like
wild.
The guys who we talked about this before, like even that perceived safety, right? These are safe starting pitchers.
Careful, right? I mean,
well, like last year. It was like, okay, Logan Webb. Right. Logan Webb is now going as the 27th starting pitcher off the board. Zach Gallen. Okay. Zach Gallen is now going as the 36th starting pitcher off the board because these were the safe guys. Zach Eflin, who was like, okay, maybe we didn't buy Zach Eflin fully what he did in Tampa, but like this is a good pitcher and he's in a good team context and he'll at least be like a top 25 or 30 pitcher again. He's going the 52nd starting pitcher off the board. Like those perceived safe guys, a lot of them didn't really pan out.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing, like, I think with the exception of like Zach Wheeler, Corbin Burns, have a perceived, George Kirby to a certain extent, have a perceived safety that I think maintained from 2024 to 2025 based on where they're being drafted right now. And that might be the end of the list in terms of like, hey, this guy is safe and I'm going to take him at the top. Garrett Cole is going the 15th starting pitcher off the board right now. That is not saying that the belief in Garrett Cole is safe heading into last year is the same as the belief in Garrett Cole now. Absolutely. He dropped 15 spots or 14 spots, right? So, yeah, like stop trying to take the safe guy early on. And you can evaluate your risk on different things. I think you and I, to our, based on, obviously we spend a lot of time talking about pitching. And so we've kind of come to a consensus where like risk in terms of injury for us is fine if the results are going to be there when they're on the mound.
Right. We
risk in terms of results. Yeah. Risk in terms of results is a little bit different. And those are the guys that are down a little bit lower in like the Gavin Williams, Jesus Luzardo, Tanner Houck, who's going like starting pitcher 62, Luis Heel, starting pitcher 57, right? Those are like risky result guys. We're not sure what version of them they're going to get, but if I'm getting them around starting pitcher 55 to 65, like I'll take those risks even more then, because what does it matter at that point?
Yep, exactly. You nailed it. I mean, Robbie Ray, Yusei Kikuchi, Reynaldo Lopez could be thrown in there. I would say, though, right before them is Jared Jones and Kodai Senga. There is some for Jared Jones. I still feel like he's just dope and is going to be amazing. Kodai Senga, a little bit more interesting because of the arm injury and then the calf after. Mm-hmm. But I feel like if he's healthy, you should feel more confident in him versus Raylo, Yusei, and Robbie Ray, who went right after in pretty much the same 6 picks or so. I would much rather have Kodai Senga, right? So it's really just it's my ethos completely here, and it sounds like it is yours too, Eric. Of just go for the guys who are good. I know it's crazy. Just go for the guys who are good pitchers.
It is wild.
Believe in the waiver wire. Believe in it. If you have any questions, just ask my morning stream. Seriously, 10 to 12 a.m., 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. every weekday morning in season. I will be here answering your questions and helping you make those decisions. Just come on by. We'll do it together. But man, it is such a deep starting and pitching pool. I have no idea how I'm going to rank 400 of these correctly. I'm not going to do it correctly. That's the answer.
And listen, reach out to Nick and I both on Twitter. Obviously, he's at PitcherList. I'm at Samsky NYC. If there is an interesting way that you would like to hear us like talk about or group these starting pitchers, we're, besides going through Nick's top 400 when it comes out, we're still debating what's the best way to give you kind of like information heading into the season of how to look at these starting pitchers. Do you want us to look at like just the aces, just the SP2s? Do you want us to look at ADP on a relatively, consistent basis? Do you want us to look at like quote unquote safe guys versus quote unquote upside guys, ratio guys, strikeout guys? Like if there is a way that makes sense for you, the listener, to hear us break down these starters, we're more than happy to try to put together the information in a way that will be as useful to all of you as possible. So, don't hesitate to let us know that.
Yep. But Eric, look at that. 500 in the books. Thanks for helping out.
Hey, I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm honored to be a part of it. And we're going to make the next 500 as good as the first 500.
It'll be so good.
So we are now the holidays are over. Nick and I are going to get back to doing this a little bit more regularly. And then February, we will get back into 2 a week once the top 400 comes out and we start to break those out. So you'll get podcasts from us regularly for the next month or so. And then we'll kick into high gear. It'll be a Pitcher List version 11. It'll be Eric Samulski version 40 because the big 4-0 at the end of January, and we'll start giving you the information here.
Oh my gosh! So are you going to do PitchCon on your birthday?
When's PitchCon?
PitchCon is going to be the turn of the month into
Okay.
February. I haven't
Yeah.
formally announced it, but yeah, it is that weekend.
No, I'm a few days before the turn of the month, but yeah, I'll be on there. You can
Okay.
bake me a cake and we'll have it on PitchCon.
We'll have you blow it out digitally.
Sounds good.
But it's great to have you back. And 500. So good to be doing these again. Oh, yeah, of course, Plus Pitch Podcast will be starting soon with the full rotation breakdowns for the entirety of January. So look out for those as well.
Look out for all of those. Leave a rating, review. Let us know how you feel about the podcast, wherever you get all that kind of stuff. And we'll check you back for another episode. I am Eric Smolsky, the Pelican.
I'm Nick Pollock, the Lion.
And we'll check you out another episode of On the Corner.